Aha, Take On Me. It's BBC Radio Oxford. A very good afternoon. Now, my next guest, he lost his job after 33 years of toiling in the world of motor finance. It hit him pretty hard. He felt lost, and one way of dealing with the blow was writing a diary. Well, that's when it all changed. He liked writing. It was cathartic, and the next thing he knows, he's a published author. Barrie Hyde, he's had quite a journey, and he joins me now. Good afternoon, Barrie.
Hi, Kat. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's just go back then. So,
Sure.
33 years in motor finance. What was your role within motor finance?
Well, I grew from being a trainee representative, and I became a rep, senior rep, worked my way through the ranks to senior management, he says, in inverted commas. And yeah, I was doing very nicely. Thank you very much indeed. I had 2 nice new cars on the drive, huge mortgage, kids at private school. Everything was hunky-dory. And then suddenly, it all stopped.
So, you had no idea this was coming. You, as far as you were concerned, you knew the industry incredibly well inside out because you'd been part of it for over 3 decades. You were giving it your all. You were an asset, I would imagine, to the higher-ranking members.
I certainly always produced results, yeah. And did I see it coming? I think for several weeks before, quite a few of us knew something was going on because you see the signs.
Quite a few of what the mature members of staff?
Yeah. You see things like closed doors when those doors shouldn't be closed doors of the managing director. You see people not looking you in the eye. And you think, hello, what's going on here? And the week before, I had a meeting arranged with my manager the following Friday. Suddenly it was put forward to the Monday for no reason. So I walked in on the Monday morning to see one of my colleagues picking up his jacket and disappearing out of the door. And then another one, the same thing happened. My appointment was at 10 o'clock. So I copied as much as I could onto a memory stick of all the information on the company that I could think of. I forgot one thing, which was a bit infuriating at the time. But because I just knew it was going to happen. Then I was called in, and guess what? There was a lady from Human Resources sitting with my boss.
It's always a telling tale.
And I'm sorry, Barrie, we've got some bad news for you. And so I went home probably 20 minutes later. My wife said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm out of a job." And it was a pretty difficult time. It's rather like a death in the family, quite honestly, Kat. You're suddenly all at sea, you're totally unbalanced. I'm used to a routine, and I would get up, put my suit on, shave, etc., go to work. Suddenly you wake up in the morning and you think, what am I going to do now? And I had no idea, so I started writing to all my ex-colleagues and my customer base to try and find somebody who might say, I wrote officially to say, thanks for the business, been lovely knowing you, hope to see you again. Really what I was saying was, give us a job, pal, I can do that job. And you find out very quickly that you don't have many friends in the commercial world, I tell you.
So when you're mortgaged up to the hilt, when you've got 2 very nice cars on the driveway and you've got your children in private school, you need to get back into the workplace.
Absolutely.
Pretty PDQ.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of people knock Social Security, but the best thing I did was go and sign on, not because of the money, but because they were so helpful in terms of advice. They put me on courses, they helped me in terms of my CV, how to put it together. And, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, they're all a bunch of left-wing loonies down there. They're not. They're people trying to get people back into work, and I have total respect for them.
What did it do to your self-respect, Barrie?
Self-respect basically goes down the loo, I'm afraid, Kat. You feel totally inadequate. You find it very difficult to face people. And you try to find a way forward. The pressure in terms of, just the monetary pressure it makes life very, very difficult. You think about nothing else. You feel very, very sorry for yourself. I remember going to the pub a few nights after I'd been made redundant. I never go to the pub by myself, but this time I just wanted to get out, find some space and have a drink. So I was standing at the bar. I had too many beers, truth be known, and I said to a little girl standing next to me, "I've been made redundant." And she said, "That happened to me 3 years ago, and it's the best thing that could have happened." And I've always remembered that because she was dead right. Because this isn't a sad story, by the way.
No, absolutely, it's not. And in fact, that's something that we'll talk about. And in fact, that was one of my questions in my head for you a little bit later. Perhaps when you look back in hindsight, retrospectively, you think, well, actually, that was the best thing that ever did happen to me. But you mentioned your wife a little earlier. How did it affect your marriage? I mean, one minute you're in this high-powered job, the next minute you're home really early, and you've told your wife, you've delivered this blow to her, that you've lost your job.
Well, she was as worried as me, and it put enormous pressure on the relationship. Put a pressure on the relationship with the children as well. I say the children, they were basically growing up then. My daughter was about to go to university, and my son was at university by then, fortunately. But I mean, the pressure within the family grouping, if you like, is a lot more than people realise, and it's one of the knock-on effects of being made redundant. And it's crazy because there's so much experience out there, people in their mid-50s who are put on the scrap heap. I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking right across the board now. And these people have got so much to give, and yet there's nowhere for them to give it.
Were you given a real reason as to why you were shown the door?
The official reason, let's get this straight, they had to cut costs, and therefore they were looking at the most effective way to make the company more efficient. Truth be known, the company had made and I'm not going to name them for obvious reasons, the company had made a mess of a particular product. It had cost them 40-odd million. And their parent company told them to get the house in order and to get that money back. So the easiest way to do that is to take out a tier of senior management. Why? Because we're earning more money than other people. Why are we earning more money? Because we've been successful over the years. So you just strip out that tier. But what happens, and if you look at the banks as a prime example, the next generation come up, the kids who haven't got the experience, and what happened in the banks? Oh, I know, we've got a good idea. We'll lend to the unemployed in America. And look what happened to the banks. The banks did exactly the same thing. They took out a tier of management, brought the whiz kids in, who made a complete and utter mess of it. And this is happening right across industry at the moment. It's tragic.
Barrie, apart from going to the pub and perhaps drowning your sorrows, you did something else. You started writing a diary. Yeah,
I had to get myself into a routine. So I made sure I got up every morning. I set the alarm for 7:30, and I got up and I shaved and I dressed to get myself into a little routine. I would have breakfast, and then I went and sat at my PC and started writing about my experiences from the day before. It could have been writing letters to friends, colleagues, customers, whatever. It could have been applications for a job. It could have been putting my CV together, anything. And I would just write about it.
And that was, I suppose, a way of offloading. Did you feel better?
Oh, yeah. It was a cathartic response to being put on the scrap heap. I needed to do something to keep my mind alert, if you like. And after 6 months, I found I'd written about 90,000 words. Now, to put it into perspective, the first Harry Potter book is about 74,000 words. So I knew I had enough for a book. So I thought, I found my way forward here. I found a fortune. I don't need to go back to work. I'll just sell my book and everybody will buy it. And life's good again. Only one problem, I couldn't get it published.
Well, Barrie, we'll talk about you also joining a writing group as well, which I would imagine gave you some sort of confidence to go forward and write a book. Because, the publishing journey is not an easy one. It's a very, very hard one. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the book, A Higher Authority, in a few moments' time. My guest is Barrie Hyde. This afternoon we'll return to our conversation after The Move. The Move and Flowers in the Rain. It's BBC Radio Oxford. A very good afternoon. And my guest in the studio is Barrie Hyde. And after 33 years, if you've just turned on, actually, this is not all doom and gloom, this story. After 33 years of working in the motor finance industry, 33 years of toil and good behaviour, he gets shown the door by the managing director. He felt a bit lost. He had to tell his wife, of course. Children at public school, as you were saying, 2 cars on the drive, mortgage up to the hilt. What are you going to do next? You start writing a diary entry. And this is the real thing that changed your life. So this is where we pick up the story, because you, after writing about your experiences and what you were doing on a daily basis and having that routine, you decided to join a writing group.
Yeah, and to anybody who's listening who fancies themselves as a writer, just type into Google.
Don't we all?
Type into Google your local town and writers, and I can guarantee a writers group will come up.
We've got a book in all of us, haven't we?
Well, the wonderful thing is, if you go to a writer's circle, writing can be a lonely business because obviously you're sitting at your PC or you could be handwriting and you're not talking to people. But if you go to a writer's circle or a writer's group, you find kindred souls, people who are interested in what you're doing. And I started reading little stories. We set each other exercises, and there's normally about a dozen of us go. I still go. And, this week we had an exercise about a photograph of a young army corporal, and we had to write a story around it. And that's the sort of thing we did. Now, within 2 weeks, they had a competition, the 2 weeks of me joining. And much to my astonishment, I won this competition. Having never written a story since my O-levels, as we used to call them in those days. I'm that old. And somebody came across to me and he said, "You're good. You should try and do this a little bit more seriously." So I would go along to this meeting every month and I'd read out my stories. And I found out I like this. I like being my own boss. I like using my own imagination. Rather than writing boring corporate reports, I can write stories about people and places, and if I find somebody I don't like, I can kill them off. It's great.
So you were like a flower that was unfurling its petals, blooming and blossoming.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds corny, but there I was in by then my late 50s, and I was finding myself. I was finding something that I've always wanted to do, but never knew I wanted to do it. And it was absolutely wonderful.
And what were you finding out about yourself then in this whole process? Because then it just literally sounds like just a process of self-discovery.
I found out that I had an imagination, number one, that I could use to put stories onto paper, which people told me were good.
So when you're going to work every single day, you're doing the same thing over and over again, sitting in an office, doing what's expected of you. There's no room to be creative. And this was suddenly a time when you could reflect and you got involved with this, and suddenly this talent had clearly been lying dormant for 50-odd years.
Absolutely. And it was such a joy to discover something that I was actually... Not that I said I was good at, that other people said I was good at. And I hope that doesn't sound conceited, but I mean, I'm the sort of bloke, I was always useless at sport at school. If there was a football team to be picked, I'd be the guy still standing by the wall when the last person was picked. I've got a lazy eye, so I don't see three-dimensionally. I'm playing for sympathy now. But that's the way it was. And, I mean, I was adequate as a student. I got the world's worst degree. I mean, I could never have made Balliol College, Oxford, where my hero went, or anything like that. But, to actually find something that people say you excel at in later life is a joy and a privilege, quite honestly.
Let's talk about your hero. Let's talk about the book, A Higher Authority. Give us a compendium of the story.
The story is about a young man who has a gift for languages. His mother is Italian, his father English, brought up in England. He's brought up bilingual, and he finds he has a gift and he can pick up a language very, very quickly. He goes to Balliol College, as I said, in Oxford, and he does a degree in Italian, and he gets a first. Then, like so many students, he wonders, what's he going to do next? He's on a tube in London, and he sees an advert for MI5. So he thinks, that could be interesting. And the adverts do appear in London on the tube. This is absolutely true. This is actually based on truth, this bit. I knew somebody who joined MI5 on this basis. And after a year, he joins MI5, and he's working in their surveillance unit on the linguistic side of things. Then he gets a tap on the shoulder. He gets a phone call from something calling itself a higher authority. Now, the higher authority is funded by governments from around the world. They take the whiz kids from the various security agencies from around the world, and their job is to quietly take out the bad guys around the world. Although nobody would admit that the higher authority exists. Colloquially, it's known as the organisation. And the organisation is well funded, and these guys are well trained. And my hero is trained in Kenya at a training camp, which again nobody would admit to. He falls in love with his colleague, a Chinese girl called Zan, and the two of them get involved working for a major marble importer based in Italy, but they've grown quickly, well beyond the realms of anything that is realistic in the world. And they've bought up pub chains in the UK, coffee chains in the States, etc., etc. And nobody can work out how they've grown so quickly. So our boy is planted in there just as a collection specialist, nothing special. And he's based in London. His colleague Zan is based in Switzerland, and the two of them work out what this company is all about. And they get involved in death and destruction, money laundering, drug running.
Well, it sounds, Barrie,
and
like a wonderful story. We'll talk more about it, and we'll talk more about the process of publishing, which, of course, is the hard part.
Oh, that's fascinating.
After this.
Kat Orman on digital 95.2 FM and online.
BBC Radio Oxford.
Radio for Oxfordshire.
My guest in the studio is author Barrie Hyde. He's gone from bigwig, a high-ranking bigwig in the motor finance industry, to an author of a book called A Higher Authority. How do you go, Barrie, from sitting in front of a desk, pen pushing, doing pretty much the same thing day in, day out, to creating this wonderful storyline that you've been telling us about?
I joined the Writers' Circle, as I said, and started writing short stories. And that really was the catalyst, because I was then thinking about, should I go for the big one? Because I think it's every writer's dream to write a novel and get it published. And that was in the back of my mind. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to write a book, what am I going to write about? And it started off, a pal of mine had written a story, and it was kind of a 50 Shades type thing. But there was... absolutely. And I thought, I can't write that because my mum's got to read this and she'd be shocked and horrified. But there was a spy interest in it, and that got the old brain cells going a little bit. And I thought back to when I was a kid, and I thought, well, what did I used to like reading and writing? I used to like things like Neville Shute and Ian Fleming and Len Dayton, Jean Le Carré, that sort of thing. And I used to love programs like The Avengers and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And it was all those ideas that sort of came together. And I'll be quite honest, I got the initial few pages in terms of writing about a young Oxford graduate who joined the organisation, and I didn't know where it was going. I'm not one of these writers who plans the story chapter by chapter. Some people say that is the way to write a book. Others say you write as if you are reading a book and you don't know what's on the next page. And that's how Jackie Collins writes, of all people. And I thought, well, she's done pretty well. You might like or not like what she's done, but she's done all right. Anyway, I started writing, and I had no idea where this book was going. And I started in July 2 years ago, had an argument with a ladder on the way, and broke my shoulder in 3 places, which makes it very difficult to write. But I'd finished it in about April last year. And it's funny because I knew when I got to the end, that was it, it was finished. And it's got I'd like to think it's got quite a nice twist at the end. And I didn't want to go on. It's not the longest book in the world. I said the first Harry Potter novel is 74,000. This is 75,000. So it's a similar sort of length. It's the sort of novel I'd like to think people can read on holiday on the beach and enjoy. I'm not suggesting it's deep and pretentious. It's not Charles Dickens or anything like that. It's just a nice read which people will enjoy. It's a nice adventure yarn.
What do your children think about it? Have they read it?
Well, interestingly, they hadn't read it, and they refused to read it. My wife still can't read it.
Why?
Because she says it's too much like you. She read the first few pages and that was it. She said, I could see you in every page. But my son...
Were you writing it from that perspective, that it actually was you and you wanted to be this hero and you were jumping into a different life?
This guy is totally different to me. He's a bright boy from Oxford. As I said, I've got the world's worst degree. He's a gifted sportsman.
But your wife knows you better than anybody. So,
yes,
she clearly has picked up on those characteristics. And if she's saying that he's like you, he must be you, Barrie.
No, she's saying she can see me in terms of my writing style. I think that's what it is, Kat. I think so. I might be wrong. I don't know. But my son actually texted me the other day because he's downloaded it. And he said, Dad, this is really good. And I thought, well, that's got to be the ultimate accolade if your own son says he likes it. So there we go. So that really made my day, actually.
Well, you're beaming now, so it clearly did. Could we just mention, actually, quickly, because we're running out of time, Barrie, but just mention the whole publishing process, because that's not easy. I mean, a lot of people that write, they have to self-publish because they can't get a publishing deal. Sure. How easy was it for you to get a publishing deal?
It is tough, and you've got to have tenacity for anybody who wants to get the book published. I sent my book to 69 literary agents and publishers.
Well, that's tenacity for you.
It takes time, and you've just got to keep plugging away. If you've got belief in your book, and again, I come back to joining the local writers' club, let some friends who know about writing read it. They will tell you what they think. They'll be honest. Your family will probably be nice to you, but people within sort of who have got an interest in writing will be honest. So I got a fair amount of feedback before I started pushing it out to publishers and literary agents. But you've got to keep pushing, you've got to keep sending the emails, sending copies of the first 3 chapters and the synopsis, and hopefully, eventually, somebody will say yes. And that's what happened to me in November last year.
Now you're a full-time author. Are you working on the next one?
The sequel, I am 30,000 words into, so I'm about a third of the way there, I reckon. And but I've been so busy promoting this one, I haven't had a chance to write it for a couple of months, which is irritating because I want to know what happens next myself. So,
Barry, where do we get a higher authority?
Yeah, you can get it from all good bookshops. You can get it online. You can get it as a printed copy. All the usual places, basically. I wouldn't like to name them because I'm on the BBC, but you know who they are.
Well, good luck. And it sounded good. Sounds like a film, maybe a potential for a film.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't
if you'd like
it?
to help me write the screenplay,
Wouldn't
Kat, I'd be delighted.
Well, as long as I could be in it, darling. Lovely. Barrie Hyde.
I've got the part for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us, you two.
Cheers.